Hello, friends, and welcome to the Trinity podcast. Last time we talked about bad habits we commonly see in League, so now we want to bring it back around and talk about good habits. This episode is all about feeling good and playing good and doing good things. We also have a question from Almighty Clay, who asks, what the hell am I supposed to do after the laning phase? Good question, Clay. I hope the other podcasters can answer it, because I'm just pushing top lane. Stay tuned for good times, everyone.
Welcome to the Trinity podcast. Yo, it's that Triforce cast beaming straight to your home. Grab a beer so we know Pone ain't drinking alone. Send an email, a quick tweet, just pick up the phone. Leave a message, hit the beep if you're a creep, watch your tone. Discuss the meta game, patch notes, whatever helps your stats most. Obi-Pone Kenobi is your last hope to snatch gold. So grab your headphones and join in the fun. We'll try and force in some jokes and some cringeworthy puns. Yo, we can make it together, people. Trinity Force podcast. These boys are second to none. Now that's the end of the intro. It's time we begun.
Hey guys, welcome to the Trinity Force podcast. This is actual episode 499. Our producer Lancifer clued me into the fact that we counted wrong. And so last week was advertised as episode 499, and I was very wrong. This week's 499, which means 500's coming at you next week, Monday, if all goes to plan.
How dare you, Don?
I got nothing.
You got everyone's hopes up.
I have no idea. I have no idea when I misnumbered the Dropbox, but that was definitely my bad because I've been doing the numbers for a while now. Might have been one of those episodes where we didn't have a document that we were working from, and so that must be where I screwed it up.
Honestly, dude, there were nights where I would be the first one to upload and I would snake it in, and I think I took a guess when there was no numbers. It might have been me, honestly.
Well, I was falling on that sword, but if you want to take it, by all means.
I feel like I'm impervious, so no problem.
BuddhaBoxers.com/T-Force. Go get yourself some comfortable underwear. And as always, if you have any questions for us, feedback at trinityforcepodcast.com. We'll get back to you. We got a number of questions in our document today, which is good. That's what we like seeing. Feel free to write more. Last week, we talked about bad habits that we see out of solo queue players. This week, we're going to talk about good habits for solo queue.
That's a myth, Don. My solo queue partners never have good habits. Come on.
Actually, I'm not a solo queue partner and everything. I'm not a random you hook up with. I'm a friend. Am I a friend? Please tell me I'm a friend.
Yeah, I think you're on the list.
Okay.
You've made it. I think everybody here has made it.
Good. Thank you. My self-esteem critically needed that.
Not queuing for solo queue might be the best good habit you can build.
I like that one. That should be at the top of the list.
Ooh, doggy. This is gonna be a night here. This is not the tone I was hoping to strike for this episode here. So
we gotta get happier. All right, let's happy it up, guys.
Get more excited. This is good habits, not negative.
Good vibes.
Habits. Yeah.
I'm entering good vibes mode. This is me. This is me being good.
Me?
Good vibes.
Yeah, you.
What do you mean? What do I got for you?
Good habits.
I got lots of good habits.
He was the only one who hadn't screwed up and been negative so far. So you gotta save it for us.
Yeah,
you gotta save it for us. Okay, well,
write this ship, Mr. Jungler.
Well, there's a great video. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Donghwap. He makes some pretty funny videos. He always likes to compare League to things, but he made a video about how to improve. It was maybe 2 years ago, and he sort of broke down improvement into 4 main categories. I think he's almost mostly correct because a lot of things can be broken down within those categories. So he said, first of all, there's mechanics that come into play. And that's pretty straightforward. It's just knowing how to produce combos. Second one being game knowledge. That is the most vast of the 4 categories. And then there was, I can't remember, attitude was another one. And then the 4th one, I can't even remember what it was. Clearly not as important as the other 3.
We got 2.
But anyways, we got 3 of them. So the first one, attitude, that's pretty easy to fix. You know, I think one of the most important parts about climbing is having a positive attitude. And I know different people tilt easier from certain things. And I think, I don't know, I threw this point in our habits, but really finding the way to, or a way to calm yourself down after tough losses is pretty important. Like for me, my personal rule is if I lose 2 in a row, I take a break. So I like to play FIFA, so I go play some few casual games. If there are FIFA players out there, they'll say it's not a casual game, but you know, I take it pretty casually. Anyways, something like that.
I lose two. I like get up and I go wash dishes, or I leave my computer altogether in the area where I'm playing that game. It's just like, you know what, get out of the bad vibe zone.
Yeah, just do something, and everyone has something they like to do. If it's listen to a podcast, maybe that's what it is. I also listen to tons of podcasts. So I'll go down to the kitchen and cook some food and throw a podcast on, and it calms you down, you know? So
yeah,
whatever
I have to do
it is.
something to get my mind off of it. So something that requires me to actually think, which sometimes is another game. If I go do something like take a walk, that can help just because time helps inevitably. But a lot of the time, if it was a really bad loss, I would just be stewing on that loss during the entire walk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then I'll come back and be like, all right, it's time to redeem myself, and I'm still in a bad mood. But it's different for everyone.
That's true. And I mean, the only other thing I wanted to touch about, that video is worth watching, I would say for sure. But as far as game knowledge goes, that's something that extends right through every single point that we made. You know, it can be anything down from like builds to understanding power spikes to understanding lane matchups. You know, it's really vast. And think about that every single time you tune in to watch a stream, or right now when you're listening to our podcast, you're slowly building up your game knowledge, which means you're a student of the game, which if you take it, you know, seriously, or even like semi-seriously, you know, it all adds up eventually, and soon you'll start implementing things into your game that you didn't even realize just because you've picked them up on streams or podcasts or what have you. So yeah, it's something that slowly builds, and it's not easy. You're not going to go from bronze to diamond in a day. You know, you really have to be able to commit the time necessary for you to learn.
That kind of segues into another good point. Oh, go ahead, Todd.
I was gonna say, like, with game knowledge in particular, I think Beaver kind of hit the nail on the head. It's like one of the more difficult things of the game because there's so much of it. But at the same time, there are like tricks too where you can cut down on the amount of game knowledge you need in order to play well. And that's kind of like if you play the same role and the same character all the time, you're kind of reducing the amount of variables that change game to game, and you're making it easier to catch up. Because you have less that you have to focus on.
At a certain point, the hardest thing becomes like figuring out what the newest or the most recently reworked champion does when you don't own that champ, and so you don't even have the chance to like go in and see what's happening there.
Yeah, character abilities are probably the hardest part of the game to learn, especially that there are so many of them now. I
mean, so if you're one tricking, you know, pick a champion and you can't afford to, you know, and you're just in a situation you can't afford to go and buy Zoe and everything. I mean, definitely watch the preview on her, but then otherwise it's like, you know what, you're gonna figure her out just by running into her a couple times, and you're gonna get really frustrated because the first time you walk into Sleepy Trouble Bubble, you are going to have no idea what's actually happening, but you will quickly figure out, oh, that puts me to sleep, and then I take a shit ton of damage and I'm not happy.
But I think my point is mostly just that if you can identify what of those aspects that you have to work on, you can kind of change how you play to make it easier or harder to, you know what I mean, to focus on like a specific part of those. I mean, like if you nail down, like if you were like really need to learn top lane and you just only play top games for a while, you know, you change your play style to like, okay, I'm just gonna play top every game until I get it. Now you know what I mean, you can like, it's kind of like binging for a test almost, like the night before.
Punch, do you find it harder to play AD carry now that you're such a dedicated top laner?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of for me, it's the laning phase that was the hardest part because that requires the most attention to detail. I just kind of fall out of practice of the ADC mindset of, you know, when to trade and how aggressive I can be. Because top lane is completely different. Champions that play in top lane are completely different. I'm usually looking to dive the enemy backline or to be aggressive at certain power spots in top lane and bot lane. There's 3 other variables instead of 1. 3 other champions I got to account for instead of 1. It's because I played it for so long.
Maybe 6.
Because I played it for so long, it's not that hard to pick up again. You know, if I play the games in ADC, if I play multiple games in that role, but if I go a month just strictly playing top lane and then I'm filling ADC, it usually doesn't go all that well.
Yeah, so I looked up the video. His 4th category is map awareness. So that's pretty straightforward. But just to add to the game knowledge thing, kind of to add on to Todd's point, I'll just use an example. So let's just go to top lane. There are players like, you know, Quas and Smeb, these top pros. They have top level mechanics. They have top level map awareness attitude, and their game knowledge is also top level. And that game knowledge spreads over multiple champions. You know, it could be the entire range of top lane. So you put those guys on any one specific champion, and they know every single matchup, how it goes, the damage, the builds they need to do. But like Todd says, you can shortcut this by just playing 1 or 2 characters, so really limiting your champion pool. So there are people in Challenger, a lot of Riven 1 tricks. So these guys, like, obviously they're really good players, like Adrian Riven and Revenge, and there's a Viper, a few other ones. Their game knowledge on Riven is at the same level as these other top pros, so they're able to climb the ladder. Sure, if you put those guys on someone else, like a Maokai or a Jace or whatever it is, they may not be at the same level as they would be on their one character, but really focusing down, you sort of limit the amount of knowledge you have to soak in to be able to climb at a high level. So yeah, limiting your champion pool is one of the best things you can do to climb solo queue. It really is. Like, and if you're one of those players, a lot of people can't climb because they just chop and change every game, and you never truly understand the characters that you're playing. Whereas Todd, you know, he knows everything about Garen, absolutely everything. Every single I'm serious.
No,
I'm
laughing,
every single
because
matchup.
of the number of times I have played with Todd now has me like it has colored the impression I have of every other Garen player that I run into. Because the overwhelming majority of them is just like, you don't know what you're doing. You think you're supposed to be doing one thing, but I have seen what the Garen Master does. I've seen what you're supposed to be doing on that champion to actually be successful, and most people are doing it wrong now. Punch, we did play a game the other day with a Garen who knew what was up.
I'm pretty convinced it was Todd in disguise. Because no other Garen can do the things that Todd can do, and this guy was pulling off stuff like that. But the only thing Todd, you threw us for a loop there when you built the Sunfire cape. You know, built a little tanky, but you know we saw through your ruse, knew it was you.
Yeah.
So we're just glad we can get the same game.
So we can sort of transition this into another point that Dom makes.
Before we jump off that, I wanted to add on to what you said initially. When we're talking about these guys who like one trick at this like really high level, you know, like, League is not unlike other hobbies where if you experience it with people who are better than you, you will catch up to them very quickly. So when you shortcut your your requirement to start playing with better people, you get to that point where you're going to start improving just through like your experiences in the games significantly more. You get to that point faster. Yeah. So honestly, it's like my personal recommendation has always been, you know, find a character in a role you like and spam it till you get to like a respectable level of play. And it's so easy to build the rest of your game off of that.
Yeah, when you make mistakes and get punched by better players, you're going to realize what you can and can't do. And knowing your champion to the maximum level is an excellent way to do that. And that sort of moves into a really good point Dom made in the document, which was, you know, balance your team's roster. So when you're in champion select, really make sure that your team has everything you need to be successful. So if you're last pick jungle, last pick support, whatever it is, you don't have crowd control, make sure you get that. Or you don't have peel, make sure you grab that. And that's a part of game knowledge, but also you can sort of limit your champion pool. You don't have to one trick necessarily. That's a great way to improve, but you could also just maybe 2 or 3 characters, one of each, you know? You could be a support player who plays Leona, Janna, and Zyra, sure, a mage. Yeah, so now you've got one of each, and then you just pick whatever one you want into the matchup.
And like, balancing your team's roster and everything, it's easier to do in some roles than it is in others. If your team is really heavy on attack damage and you're the support player, you're not necessarily balancing your team's roster by deciding to pick, Morgana or Zyra or something just to add that magic damage element, because you're on the low economy role. So you're better off looking at the team and thinking, okay, what is, I can't really add significant magic damage, but I can add significant crowd control or significant peel and healing for all of these attack damage champions. And that's going to be like the better route for you to go than trying to just like bandage, the magic damage issue.
Yeah, if you can't balance it, you would
do
want to enable it.
try to fill a tank role as a support if there are no tanks on the team? Will you go in as the only solo tank?
I almost always do. The exception, I guess, was sort of the end of last season where it was unquestionable. Like, it didn't matter what your comp was and everything. The correct answer was picking Janna, Lulu, or Taric. Like, that was, assuming they were on the board, but that was the only exception. By and large, if my team is missing a tank, I try to pick that type of champion. It helps that I prefer to play that type of champion. Like, I love playing Alistar, I love playing Rakan. And just those heavy engage, crowd control type champs are what I like to do. So that might be factoring into my willingness to play a tank every time. But, that aside, I do still think, that would be the attitude I have.
I think it's worth mentioning that when you're looking at like where your damage sources come in your team comp, there are other ways besides, like if it's too late to change your character pick, like there are ways you can still affect it inside of the match. Things like rushing a cleaver, maybe when it would normally be your personal favorite item, it can be a big deal for like the early and mid game stages if your team comp has too much AD. Also, even if you don't play like an AP character, there are a handful of champs who reduce armor, like Garen, Jarvan, and Wukong all come off the top of my head as reducing armor a fair amount. Trundle, and like if your team is like out tanked, you could pick Trundle. Maybe it's not the difference of AP versus AD, but you can just pick someone who can steal tank stats, and maybe pull a frontline character out of the enemy team comp if it's more that than what the damage sources are. That kind of goes fairly deep. I mean, your itemization too, like the support itemization, like maybe you make Talisman this game because your team is like lacking in engage.
That's something I absolutely look at every single game. There are times where I would like to, go with, Relic Shield or Spell Thief's Edge. But, if my team just doesn't have that go button, and I know I'm not going to be able to really accomplish the same thing with Righteous Glory, I will absolutely itemize into Talisman just because it's so important and effective. But that kind of segues into another thing, like, I have it in here. Knowledge is power, press tab. And that's because, like, there's a lot of really, really useful information for you if you just press tab and look at more than your own creep score relative to your opponents. If the entire enemy team, for example, is itemizing heavily into armor in the early going, the mage is already working on Zanya's, and they have the arm guard, top laner and jungler are already getting tanky, and it's a tanky support, we'll say, and everything. If you're the AD carry, buy a Last Whisper earlier than you might be inclined to, because that's going to add a lot more damage, and it's going to make that armor a lot less useful for them in the long run.
Yeah, if you ever find, everyone's done this before, you roll up to a character, you're like, yeah, I'm strong, you fight them, and then you get your ass handed to you, and you're like, oh, you press tab after, you're like, oh, they had Ignite, why did they take Ignite? Oh, they've already finished 3 items, why have they done that? That's your fault you died. Everyone's done that here, I can see everyone smiling. And I still do it. I'm like, why did they have Thornmail already? It's like, that's my fault for not checking before I went in.
As somebody who only plays top with Ignite, dude, like, I get that comment in the all chat a fair bit from the enemy as well. Like, oh my god, you had Ignite, like, why did you take Ignite? So cheesy. Like, it's usually like a complaint because it's like
to kill your ass.
Yeah, it's exactly. Like, you're the one that's dead, so
mission accomplished.
But like, so like that just says, like, no matter how high you think you've gotten, no matter how good you think you are, like, there's something simple that even some of the best players probably overlook consistently.
There's always something to learn for sure.
Checking and pinging timers and summoner spells is right there in the tab menu as well.
Yeah, conveniently. You don't have to time it anymore. It's not like old school jungling where you have to actually learn and track buffs.
Man.
You're just like, oh, you remember those days? Like,
Yeah, dude, they did make
They're
the game
blue.
a lot easier.
They do.
And yet people are still not taking advantage of all that stuff.
No, definitely not.
Blows my mind. It's right there on the screen.
Another item that feels really bad to not tab and see ahead of time is the pocket watch, the stopwatch. Now that you can get that through masteries, your lane opponent has a stopwatch. All of a sudden, you get baited and you're dead. It just feels terrible.
Oh, one more thing about the jungle time. Sorry, finish your point.
I was just gonna say, same goes for Zanya's. If you finally leave your top lane or bottom lane and you're playing against enemy mid laner and like, oh, they have Zanya's. Well, another thing to watch out for.
Yeah, it feels bad when you're Rengar on these Zonias. But I was just gonna say, if you don't know this, I'm sure most people do, but when buffs are about to spawn, when it's 1 minute before, the icon will turn like white basically, and then 20 seconds before it spawns, it turns yellow.
Yeah, it pops up on the map initially.
Yeah.
At 1 minute, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To let you know.
And just touching on the stopwatch real quick, the perfect timing rune, it grants you a free stopwatch at 6 minutes, or your opponent, more specifically. So at the 6 minute mark, like check your opponent's.
But you can see it
inventory.
before the 6 minute mark.
It's there.
It's just not ready to use yet.
Oh, okay. So yeah, just keep an eye on that and everything, and know that hey, at 6 minutes they suddenly have this when they didn't before. I don't run into that one a whole lot in bot lane, so
you see it in the solo lanes sometimes.
Yeah, I bet.
Another
see it a lot in mid.
Another decision I make often in top, if I need to build armor particularly, is which armor item to buy. And that always comes down to looking at well, not always. I mean, sometimes it's based on the champion, but a lot of the time it's based on what the enemy team, what items they have finished, what items they're going for. The ADC is a crit-based champion. I'm buying Randuin's. If there's a lot of lifesteal on the enemy team, I'm buying Thornmail. And
the nice part is that you can buy the Warden's Mail and then figure out what you're going to do with it later, since it builds into 3 items.
It's great.
I would say Bramble Vest is still pretty OP in top lane. Like if you're running up against a Fiora or like a Warwick for some reason, or an Aatrox, anyone that has lifesteal, you just build that bad boy first, and then I'm gonna be able to kill you.
Yeah, Bramble's still powerful for sure. I would agree.
Like I'm pretty sure if the item wasn't in the game, Fiora would be a top tier top laner. She crushes tanks.
She was before it was in the game. That would make sense.
It's true. Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't deserve to be good again.
We talked a bit about champions and everything, but if you're really struggling, to find, get into a groove or anything like that, pick champions that are going to be easier to play. Like, and this isn't, I'm not saying like taking a shot at Garen or anything and saying noob champion. I'm just saying like you do not have to freaking play Yasuo just because you've seen somebody do really well, or you don't have to play Riven just because she's on the board or something. Like these are champions that require a lot of precision and finesse in order to play really well, and you can be a much more effective contributor when you're not trying to worry about that a level of micro that you don't really have a grasp on yet.
Yeah, like if you're a jungler and you're just starting out and you don't want to worry too much about mechanics, 3 characters that you could pick up that sort of do different things. You play Warwick because he's a nice middle ground if you're a first pick. You could play Rammus if you really need to play tank, or Sejuani. They're like interchangeable. And then you could pick up someone like a Nocturne if your team's lacking damage or you really need to dive someone. All simple champions to play. What would you guys suggest from your rules?
Leona, if you need to play a tank, because her durability is kind of there from the get-go, whereas Alistar, you have to wait for it, and Alistar's combo requires some practice to really get the hang of. Janna, if you're going to go for an enchanter, she's pretty easy to play at this point relative to the field. I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up for the mages and everything. They're all doing damage, but they're all doing different things, and,
Yeah, Brahm's pretty good too out of the bot lane.
Yeah,
pretty straightforward champion.
Yeah, Braum is a different type of tank.
Lulu.
Do you want to do top punch or?
First thing that comes to mind is Maokai. Maokai would be a very good pickup for top lane. Very easy to play, very strong.
Disgusting.
I would say
Gets half an item, is super tanky.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's ridiculous. Maybe I'm biased. I'm not sure if this is a good answer or not, but I don't think Aurelia is particularly hard to play. She's got 3 abilities that she can't miss, and then her ultimate, which you can just spam. I mean, anytime you've got multiple abilities that you can't miss, easy to play champion, pick them up. They're very strong. Like the old Rise, right?
I would say a lot of Aurelia is just learning her matchups, like
Yes.
when your power spikes are and when you can kill people.
That's the most complicated part, is just her matchups.
P.S.
So
It's
really,
usually level 4.
right. Yeah, they're pretty much all the
personally
same.
think,
It's just like level up to 4 and try to get Trinity Force as fast as possible. Boom, you've learned Aurelia.
I personally think if you're having a hard time impacting the game, I think Shen is a really easy character to pick up to where you can just start impacting the game in a really significant way. He's just a safe laner. You can ult down to help out, and when the TP meta, you just go back top and you just hold the turret indefinitely. And Sunfire Cape got a big buff, which, you know, that matters for him a lot.
His W is the trickiest part of his kit.
And if you're the kind of person that really likes learning lane matchups, I think Akali is a disgusting top laner.
I wouldn't personally recommend playing her, though.
She's a little tougher to play, for
I
sure.
think she's one of
she-
those characters, like, if she starts losing, she loses really, really hard.
She does have very few bad matchups, but and if you're someone who's super aggressive in lane and you know, like, you're a Darius player, but maybe he isn't working out for you, Pantheon. Pretty disturbing. Take Ignite and
Pantheon's easy mode.
you pretty much can't lose lane.
The number of people in Discord that are complaining about Teemo, why aren't you playing Pantheon? Easiest lane of your life. Just walk over to
The only
Teemo
thing
and
you
throw a
have to
spear at
be
him.
Honestly, I think Renekton is overlooked right now. He's always been kind of like a go-to staple for top lane when it gets bruisery. But they just buffed him, and they buffed his like core item Tiamat on the same patch. So I think if you're looking to get in the top lane right now and you want somebody a little underplayed at the moment that you can just bring out and maybe beat melee matchups pretty hard, I think Renekton's a good bully that you could look at.
Renekton was my recommendation to people for a really long time, and I was hesitant to bring him up just because I didn't know how the runes ended up hitting him. But
I don't really know truthfully either. I don't think he's like amazing with any of the runes specifically, but I do know that they buffed like 2 core abilities and his base AD and Tiamat in the same patch. So
Renekton teaches you a lot of good habits that you're going to use on both fighters and bruisers. Like just the way Renekton kind of ends up doing things in a lot of different team fight scenarios ends up being like really good and healthy habits to develop.
Yeah, I
For
really.
mid lane,
Sorry, I was just gonna say I really think if we go back to those classic 4 categories, mechanics is not. I don't think it's nearly important as the other ones because you can play champions like we just suggested that don't have as many mechanics, and then you can really focus on the other aspects of the game knowledge and stuff like that. Sorry.
for mid lane, the 3 that kind of stand out to me would be Malzahar, Ahri, and Ziggs.
I wouldn't say Ziggs.
Really?
Yeah, just because I don't think he roams very well. And
Well,
he,
I mean,
and he has some pretty bad...
they're not all going to teach you every.
It's true.
You know,
It's true.
I mean,
skill, but
I think
Ziggs-
Annie has to be in the top 3 list
Oh,
of
good
any
point. I
easy
forgot
mid
about
lane.
Annie.
Annie, Malzahar. I think Talia is really easy to play. I picked her up just the other day. She's pretty simple. Once again, you can play Pantheon mid, and he kills pretty much every mage.
And I guess to that point, we're demonstrating that hey, there are a lot of mid laners that are pretty reasonably easy to pick up.
I think mid lane's easier than people think it is. I think it's a lot easier.
And if you want to be a one-trick in mid lane, one-trick Aurelian Sol. Trust me, you will have great success.
I can get behind that.
I just think no character has the solo climbing potential that Aurelian Sol does. He can be all over the map at all times. But
You're gonna have to work, but you'll like eventually
you have to
you're
work
gonna hit
at
the
it.
point where
You have to learn the matchups. You have to learn how to path with him. He's unlike any other champion in where his damage source comes from. But once you get the hang of him, he has so much pressure. It's really awesome.
Is he easy though?
He's pretty easy, but he's just different, right? You have to learn have to like move around instead of because all of his damage comes from his passive mostly. You have to spend your time dodging abilities and trying to keep people at a certain range. Yeah, he's like mechanically simple, but he's just like slightly different than other characters. And you just have to force roams, and then you can just take control of the whole map.
So one thing we don't talk as much about is kind of like the actual mechanical skill and everything, because a point I have here is keep your mouse near your champion. And that's advice that I kind of wish I would have gotten, a lot. Like I've known this for a while now, but it's advice I wish I would have gotten, back when I was first starting the game. I think it was last year, it might have been the year before, but I went back and really toyed around with my DPI settings, because after just doing a little bit of research, I realized that my mouse is flying around way too much of the screen during any given fight. And so while I thought I was having really good reactions, I might have been having, responding really well to something, but my champion can't respond as quickly as I can. And so, while I wanted my champion to be, up where my mouse cursor was, basically the moment I was clicking there, the reality was that, the champion's going to take some time to get there, and in the process of doing that is going to get hit by auto attacks and skill shots and God knows what else, during the scheme of things. And so adjusting my DPI so that I was able to keep my cursor much more reliably around my champion made me a lot more attentive to that, and it helped me, with my ability to dodge skill shots.
Yeah, simply it just helps you change direction quickly, which is useful for all sorts of things, like you were saying, skill shots. If there's ever a tense moment, like I'm expecting a gank or I'm sitting in a bush and I'm not 100% sure where the enemy is coming from, my mouse just kind of unconsciously defaults back to the middle of the screen, which is usually where my champion is, because I know I need to move. I might need to move in any direction at any point in time. Like as soon as I see somebody, I need to move as soon as possible. So it's just the default position where your mouse should be.
Yeah, like standing still is not something you ever want to do either.
No, because then you become too predictable for your lane opponent. Easy for me to say.
Everyone here SmartCast?
Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly, not always. No.
Do you turn it on and off manually, or do you use Control SmartCast?
Mm-hmm. I use the shift. I hold shift down sometimes if I want the SmartCast, and I don't in other situations.
I know Adam was... He went from not SmartCasting to SmartCasting, and then, he SmartCast for a while, and then he switched to the way you're doing it now, Todd, where it's like... I can't remember if he defaults to SmartCast and then he holds the, shift to not SmartCast and everything. Or if it's the other way, where it's by default he doesn't SmartCast and then he holds shift when he wants to, but...
Well, you can...
But he alternates occasionally. See, I find that in certain situations, like, if they're, like, right on the cusp of, like, the range of it, sometimes it's helpful to be able to pull that indicator up. When it's, like, auto SmartCast, you don't get that option with a lot of abilities. Also, if it's a really crowded fight, sometimes SmartCasting, you put it on the wrong person. Sometimes it's helpful to be able to see exactly who I'm clicking, and it just makes it slightly easier. Like, I'm not saying that there isn't, like, maybe a speed difference, but sometimes I feel like that trade-off is worth it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people play with SmartCast with indicator. So, for example, like a Lee Sin Q,
I love that.
You would hold down the Q, and then when you let go, the Q would release to wherever you're aiming. Yeah, it's cool. It works for some people. I don't personally use it. I find it a little too slow.
Works for me. I use it. I love it.
I have a hard time, like, because everything in you up to this point in your life has been like when the button's depressed. Mm-hmm. So like the fact that you have to let it go, I could never get used to that.
Yeah, it was definitely something I had to train myself to get used to, but now it's sort of like I don't bother with the sort of the shift click one, because I kind of get the experience I'm accustomed to, and the one I've trained myself for better with just the indicators.
I have a problem. I level up my skills using Alt instead of Shift, because that's how it used to be on my laptop, and I haven't changed it, so now I don't have a keybind for self-cast. So whenever I play Kale or anything, I have to click on my character. So that's not good at all, and I need to change that.
That feels bad.
But it's going to be hard It's gonna be hard to break
Control
the
now, or
habit.
is it shift? I can't even remember. Like
I don't even have
do
it
it without thinking about it.
It's shift and then level up your skill. But I use alt because my thumb's next to it on my spacebar.
Oh.
I just find it a bit easier, especially. Well, I mean now it doesn't matter, but
Honestly,
my
I'm like
laptop.
sitting here thinking about like which button it is, and I couldn't even tell you. I just like press it.
Yeah, you just do it. And it's a
press it.
hard thing to train yourself to do, but it is 100% worth it. I know we've talked about it in the past, but just the number of times where I got a critical level, I hit level 6 in the middle of a fight. And if I had to take the time, if I had to take the time to level up that ability with my mouse by clicking and everything, I wouldn't have, gotten the kill or gotten out of a jam or something like that. I mean, just being able to on the fly get that level up and suddenly use my ability made all the difference.
When I was learning to transition to Smartcast, and for a while when I was learning new champions in general with skill shots, I would manually change the skill shot abilities to normal cast just so I could get that indicator, and just so I can until I could get used to that indicator, and then once I was used to it, I'd change that to a Smartcast, and then all my point click abilities would be Smartcast. Even now, there are some very few abilities that I'll keep on normal cast, like Poppy's R, because if that's Smartcast, you have to hold down the R key, which I don't like. Rumble's R, I don't even know how that works in Smartcast.
Rumble's R and Victor's, what is it? His E? Are two really difficult abilities to use with
I use Victor's E on normal cast as well.
when I first started playing League, it was only my second game when I was playing Rise. I think I've told this story before, but my friend saw me clicking the buttons and pressing on the champions, and he was super triggered, so he set me up to be Smartcast, and I didn't even know that there was any other way to play League. So when I started playing Rumble Jungle, I got really used to just pressing R and then laying the ultimate. I thought it was so easy, and people complain about it. I'm like, what? And then I went back to the normal cast, and I was like, I can't do this. It has to be Smartcast for me. But it takes a while to understand that when you press R on those characters, that's the origin point of the ultimate. And then when you let go of R, the direction that your mouse is pointing is where the ultimate will lay down, or the E, or whatever it is. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. I've whiffed some before. There's nothing like sending the equalizer through the wall, Just partition the wall. It's like, no! It's such a good team fight potential.
I used to play Rumble a lot on Dominion, and a friend of mine was spectating me one time when I played it, and my first ult, I sent it flying, and he, 3 minutes later, he was like, what the hell happened with that ult? I'm like, well, I had Smartcast on, and I forgot, and I ruined everything, so...
But yeah, for those characters, if you don't like Smartcasting, you can just manually click it.
I would love it if some of the settings got to be down to champion specific. For Taric, Taric, for example, I like having line missile display on. Almost everything else, I prefer the just radius around the ability. But Taric, because your secondary target is always changing. Without line missile display, you lose the range of that and the angle that you're going at, and I just kind of find that I need it to do my job better there. And if that makes me a bad player or something, then so be it. But
makes sense. Lulu's the same way with her shield and picks Q.
Yeah. Oh, what do we got here? Here's what I like. Assume everyone on the map has poor map awareness, and so ping every time someone shows on the map where they don't belong, and when your opponent isn't in lane for a few seconds.
I think pinging every time is a big one. I don't know, dude. I have fucked up so many ganks from my jungler doesn't ping. I'm not paying any attention, dude. I'm sorry. You just wasted your time. It sucks. It happens, and it's bad too because they won't come back. They're not gonna gank you again because I feel like it was pointless. So please ping. I fall asleep at the wheel sometimes.
Especially, if you're a jungler, it's especially important because usually junglers and supports have the best map awareness, simply because they have more free time to look at the map because they're not specifically last hitting or trading as much. So when you're doing camps, if you see, this happens all the time, I see the enemy jungler on a ward and I'm like, oh, they're gonna go bot because our bot's overextended. I'm sure they've seen that. They probably haven't. So usually what I do is I spam ping them until I can't ping anymore.
The one I hate is the jungler who is like counter jungling red buff and then pings bot lane. And then, so I think that means, okay, the jungler is heading over, down here pretty quick to come and do something. Or, even the jungler is wherever. But no, that means the jungler is going back to base and then going to, his own red buff or Krugs or something, and then looking at bot lane or something. It's like, don't ping that you're on the way, like you're coming to my lane unless you're actually coming to my lane.
No.
And I get that you
I
changed
disagree.
your mind, but, oh, really?
Yeah, I do this all the time. I'll ping I'm going to a lane, but I still expect the laners to check where I am when I make that ping. So if I make that ping when I'm at my first tower coming bot lane down for lane gank and they go all in and die, that's not my fault. That's your fault because I haven't done that. But I'm just saying that happens all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying like, hey, I'm gonna go in just because you pinged. I'm saying like, don't ping that you're coming here and then like when you're not remotely in position to really get there and everything, because I might start trying to set up something for when you get there because I have a rough sense for how long it's going to take you. But if you are doing something and then you're recalling and then you're taking another camp, and these are all things that happen, and then you start like running towards bot lane. These are all things that you could have done before you pinged.
Yeah.
I'd say a good thing to do if you're ganking, no matter what role you are, if you're roaming and ganking, you could ping early just to let the laner know that you're on the way so they can get the lane prepared. Whatever they have to do to the creeps to do that, if they have to let them push a little bit, whatever it is. And then start pinging more frantically as you're going in. That for teleport ganks, I will ping like crazy because I need them to know that I'm teleporting in. Because so many,
that's a great point.
So often they just don't even notice. Like I'm ganking bot lane now, and then I get 2v1. My bot lane is farming creeps.
Yeah, or sometimes I'll be ganking mid and I'll ping once, and then the mid laner will ping me off because there are too many creeps. And I'm like, okay, the ping was more like, do you want me to gank, rather than like I'm going in, But you're
successful
totally right.
Communication.
Spam pinging. Yeah. Good stuff.
We can keep on this, or we can handle a couple or some of our listener questions here. We've been talking for the better part of 40 minutes now.
Oh, just one thing on this friends one. Can we talk about this?
We can do that. Yeah, we can do it.
I just want to say, I am planning a special episode for the patron one about just duo queuing and how to abuse it properly with multiple different suites. So that it could be top jungle, top mid, jungle support. I'm going to try and get a bunch of guests on that actually duo queue with those roles. And we're going to go over all the pros and cons. So that's going to be really cool. So you guys are subscribed to that.
So my point here that Beaver's referencing is I wrote, make authentic friends, not friends you're actually competing with, which Todd took issue with. And so I think we're looking at this from two different angles, but like, go ahead and put me in my place.
I mean, so you say make authentic friends, not friends you're actually competing with. Like, that's how it reads. So like, when I think of that, I'm like, don't make friends if like the only purpose is to be competitive. But honestly, I think when you have somebody that like you're climbing, maybe not duoing with, but like you're both solo queue and like maybe similar role or the same role, so you can't duo together. And like when one person gets like a little bit above you, you're like, damn it, I need to like play serious because like I don't want to get left behind, and it kind of drives you to want to be a better player.
I was looking at it from the standpoint of like, don't make friends where your sole purpose is competing, or don't let the competition sort of negatively affect your life outside of the game. Because I kind of ran into this situation earlier on. When I first started playing the game, I got like really competitive with some of my friends. I wasn't like talking shit or anything to their face. That's not really my MO. But like in my mind, I was like, I should fucking be better than you, or I'm better than you, and like getting just developing a really toxic attitude about the whole thing. And to the point where like it didn't ruin the friendships, but there was a stretch of time where it was just like we couldn't hang out with each other because I had gotten so sort of negative and toxic about the whole thing. And so like I'm in a much better spot now, just playing with people because I want to have fun. And sometimes in some cases I'm playing with people who are better than me. Pretty much everybody in this on this podcast right now, but also like, there are plenty of people I play with who are worse players than I am, and I'm just playing to have fun. And I'm not playing with them because I want to try to prove that I'm better than they are.
Yeah, if you have a duo queue partner, I mean, friendships are often forged in the heat of battle, right? So I have a friend who I've been duoing with for 3 years, and we're best friends now. And we always push each other, but in healthy ways. You know, like saying, "Oh, you know, why did we lose this game? Maybe you should have done this. Maybe, oh, you shouldn't have done this at this time." Things like that. Not being toxic, because that's unhealthy for your friendship, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
being friends, but also pushing yourselves with constructive criticism, is a great way to climb and get better. Real life friends should be like that too. Fun fact.
All right, we're gonna do a couple of questions here. Actually, this fits pretty well here. Almighty Clay writes, as I leveled my account, I played support and thought I did quite well. But after I hit 30, I made a bad play and my duo partner opened up all of his past baggage about bad plays I made and hurled it at me. So I quit support for Season 7 and placed in low bronze as a mid laner, which discouraged me and I moved to top lane. I've been following the other advice you've given, but I feel like I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing after the first 10 minutes. I've been playing as Gnar and Nasus for the most part while trying to find a third champion to learn. I feel comfortable during laning, but I'm not very good at seeing plays after the fact. What can I do to feel more productive after 10 minutes? That was not intended. I didn't realize that this question was gonna fit so nicely with it, but there you go. Top laners. 10 minutes. What are you supposed to be doing afterwards?
I mean, it really just depends on your character. I mean, some characters need level 11 to spike. That comes well after 10 minutes. So they split push until they feel like they're strong enough to contribute to the game. Some characters split push the whole time. Some top laners are weak duelists, so you know they basically want to roam from their tower for objectives like Dragon, or maybe Herald, and then they just want to go back to their turret and hold it. You know what I mean? Like, those are the characters that want to spend as little bit of time in lane as possible and just hold the tower. It really just depends on your character, honestly. This is a fairly broad question, so...
You can say,
I mean,
for those
Gnar and
specifically,
Nasus
right?
specifically, Nasus is split pushing until he's a god. And I think Gnar is split pushing and then roaming for objectives with Mega Gnar.
Yeah, but I would, and as far as split pushing goes, if you don't know when to split push, if you can 1v1 the enemy top laner or one person that they send towards you, then it's a good idea to split push. But if your team's not getting anything from you split pushing, like if you just die and your team doesn't do anything, then it's worth grouping up, because you can deal a lot of damage. Even Nasus in team fights, you know, you can just flash Wither the AD carry and then smack them.
The other thing I could really think of, like, additionally would be you know, understanding the circumstances of the game. If you're behind at 10 minutes, you know, it's a totally different story than if you're ahead. And so you have to sort of understand what you are willing to sacrifice to get an advantage somewhere else, you know? So if your turret's already down, then you gotta, you know, you have to be really mindful of that second turret that's going to be that might be vulnerable if you leave, and you have to say, like, am I okay possibly losing this thing to go and make something happen somewhere else? You know, that's trading. We've talked about that. If you're ahead, you know, you should know that you have like a certain amount of time where you can go and do something else somewhere on the map before your turret becomes vulnerable, and then you have to understand how you're going to go get back there to defend it, or you have to be okay, you know, possibly giving it up.
And do something on the map means looking to take an objective, or set up your team, you know, through a gank to take an objective. Objective focus is the mid game, right? You want to look to take a turret to gain map control, or take a dragon, or whatever it is. That's way too soon for Baron, so you don't have to worry about that. But, you know, what's that guy's name? The purple guy there that lives there for the first 20 minutes instead? Having a brain fart here.
Harold?
Harold, there you go. You can get him, and then use him to split push if you want. But yeah, objective focus is the name of the game. Gnar, if you get that lead in laning phase, you can split push like Todd was talking about. If your team is strong enough to force an objective, taking a turret or taking a dragon, and you've got a standoff going off between your team and the enemy team, you should be looking to be the initiator. You should be looking to jump in, hit that Mega Gnar, and then use your ultimate to stun multiple people. Nasus is more focused on that split pushing for a longer period of the game, because he just needs it. He needs to build up the Q stacks, and he's a pretty good 1v1 as soon as he gets some levels and items under his belt.
Yeah, Gnar is unique in that he is equally good at split pushing and team fighting. Not a lot of champions get to say that, like the likes of Maokai, Malphite, and these guys are pretty much strictly team fighters. Whereas Tryndamere, and Nasus, these kind of guys, they're more split pushers, but Gnar gets to have that nice middle ground. So
to try and decide between whether you're whether to split push or team fight, I'd say look at what your team is doing. Try to decide whether or not your team can get the objective if they're in a position to team fight. If it's just a standoff and neither team is doing anything, there's too much wave clear on one side, so the other team can't push a turret. That's where you should go look to put pressure somewhere else. Because if you have 5 people pressuring one lane and you can't get anything done, you're not going to accomplish anything. So that's a good time to split push, to start to force the enemy team to make a decision. So, we got to send somebody to go deal with the split pusher now. We don't have one threat. Now we have multiple threats, and we got to decide what to do. And you still have that teleport to get back to your team if need be.
Don't underestimate the value of being somewhere you don't belong. We touched on it earlier. You're supposed to ping when you see an opponent who's somewhere where they don't belong. Don't underestimate doing that for yourself and everything. Todd is the best at doing this because he will have his lane, doing exactly what he wants, and then he will just go and run into the enemy jungler and he will get a kill at the opponent red buff. Now, Todd's been playing this game and this, his champion for a really long time, so he knows a lot of paths and he knows what junglers are going to be doing. But just seriously tune into his stream sometime and watch him just go and show up in places where nobody ever expects the top laner or the Garen to be. And by the way, if you see a brush, just assume Garen's in there. Yeah.
And one of the reasons he's so good at it is because he takes Ignite and he doesn't have the crutch that is teleport. Sometimes players overly rely on teleport. And they're like, oh, I'll teleport into the team fight, but team fights can be over in 4 seconds if someone's out of position.
Yeah, we're getting to season 8 here, and people still don't expect Garen to be in the bush. This is season 1, people. Come on, he's in every bush.
There were a couple games last week where just by happenstance I got to hang out in the brush with Todd while waiting for something to happen, and my God, that is just some of the most fun you'll have ever playing this game.
Yeah, you take your hands off the keyboard for 30 seconds, and then somebody just walks into a spot where they get auto-killed for it. It's just...
And when you see him coming, you feel like the cat that's getting really excited to pounce, or the dog that's really, really excited because somebody's coming up to the door or something. It's just you can feel your ass shaking and everything because you're so excited about what's gonna happen next.
And one more thing on this question. If you want to add one more character to your pool, you have Nasus, who's a pretty passive laner. You're just trying to scale for late game. Gnar, who's sort of like a catch-all, a good first pick. Maybe adding someone quite aggressive, someone who can win lane and dominate would be good. So, obviously I always say Pantheon, but do you guys have any other suggestions? Or do you think that's a fair point? Or
Garen, Renekton used to be the one I would go to, but again, I don't know if runes and everything hit him and made that different.
Do you think an aggressive champion or a full tank would be something you'd look to add to that pool?
Honestly, I think tanks are safer. If you want something safe, you should play a tank.
Shen.
Back to Maokai or Shen.
I think Shen is solid. Yeah. Ornn is permaban right now, but grab him if you're able to. His W is broke.
All right. I think that about does it for us this week. Thanks for joining, guys. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Any last thoughts?
I love top lane.
I love jungle.
I love sleep.
I don't have anything good to add.
Yeah. Punch has been a trooper here. Punch is under the weather. He still showed up for this podcast, and I really do appreciate you coming out.
I don't know what you're talking about, Dom. I've been super enthusiastic this podcast.
Did Cyril get you sick when he was down?
Yeah, the makeout session was poorly advised.
Hey, that bed that you shared behind you.
He brought his East Coast
it was a bad idea.
Virus. All right, that's our show. That's another we're leaving on and everything. Episode 499, episode 500 next week. All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Woo. See you guys.
Later, dogs.
Thanks for listening to our product and being a member of the Trinity Force Network community. If you have a moment, please head over to iTunes and give your favorite show a comment and a rating. If you're so inclined, you can check out all of the other great shows in the network. We've got a wide variety of content from League of Legends to general gaming and role-playing podcasts. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit under T-Force Network. We've also got a Patreon under that name where you can support your favorite shows with a small donation each month. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you continue to enjoy all of our podcasts, videos, and the community that we've provided.